We dug a hole in the ground, built a fire in it, and baked a pizza bigger than anything that's ever come out of my oven upstairs. My name is Samuel Mast. I farmed 200 acres of Amish land in Millersburg, Ohio for 30 years. We cooked without electricity for every meal, every single day. Bread, meat, vegetables, all of it, over fire, sometimes underground. We never owned a modern oven. Not once in 30 years. I left my community and watched my neighbors pay $2,000 for a backyard pizza oven we built for free out of dirt and stone. Today, I'm telling you exactly how we did it. Underground ovens are not a trick or a gimmick. This is one of the oldest cooking methods that exists anywhere in the world, older than any oven you'll find in a kitchen store. Amish farms used a version of this for generations, especially for large gatherings, church meals, and harvest celebrations. The idea is simple once you understand it. You build a fire directly in a pit dug into the ground. Let that fire heat the surrounding earth and stone for hours. Then remove the fire and use the trapped heat to cook food slowly. This method produces heat unlike anything a home oven can match. A proper earth oven reaches temperatures well above 700 degrees. Heat moves through stone slowly, but once stone is fully heated, it holds and releases that heat steadily over a long period. Stone acts almost like a battery for heat, storing it during the long fire-building stage, then releasing it slowly and evenly. Let's talk about choosing your spot first. Pick a location away from any structure, fence, or overhanging tree branches. Choose ground that's naturally dry, not lying. A pit dug into damp soil holds moisture that fights against your fire. Avoid digging near tree roots or underground utility lines. Contact your utility company before digging anything deeper than a few inches. For a single large pizza, dig a pit about 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Use a pickaxe for clay or buried rocks. Dig straight down with vertical sides. Sloped walls tend to collapse loose soil into your pit as the fire burns. Now, stones. Use only dry, dense stones. River stones can crack or even explode when exposed to intense heat. Line the bottom and sides of your pit completely with these stones, fitting them together as tightly as possible. Once your pit is fully lined, it's time to build the fire. Start with dry hardwood like oak, hickory, or applewood. Let this fire burn steadily for a minimum of 3 hours. It's about slowly heating the stone and surrounding earth deeply. You'll know your pit has reached proper temperature when the stones have turned white or grey with ash buildup. In the next part, I'll walk you through raking out those coals and building the pizza itself. From dough to the underground heat. Now let's talk about preparing the pizza itself, since this needs to happen while your fire is still burning. Start with the dough. Amish kitchens made bread dough constantly, and pizza dough follows nearly the same basic method. Mix 4 cups of all-purpose flour with 2 teaspoons of salt in a large bowl. In a separate bowl, dissolve 1 packet of active dry yeast into 1½ cups of warm water. Let this sit for 5 minutes until it turns foamy on top, confirming the yeast is active and working. Add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the yeast mixture. Then pour this mixture into the flour, stirring until a rough dough forms. Turn it out onto a floured counter and knead by hand for about 8 to 10 minutes until the dough turns smooth. Place the dough in a lightly oiled bowl, cover it with a clean towel, and let it rise in a warm spot. Starting your dough right after you begin building the fire keeps both processes finishing around the same time. While the dough rises, prepare your sauce and toppings, keeping everything simple for the hot underground oven. For sauce, use crushed tomatoes, a pinch of salt, dried oregano, and minced garlic, simmered briefly for 10 minutes. Avoid anything too watery here, since a thin sauce soaks into the dough before it reaches the hot stone. For cheese, fresh mozzarella works beautifully here, though it should be torn and drained on a paper towel first. Pulling out some of that extra moisture before it goes onto the pizza keeps the crust from getting soggy. Keep toppings light. 2 or 3 toppings, sliced thin, cook far more reliably in this kind of intense heat. Once your dough has finished rising, punch it down gently and divide it if you're making more than one pizza. Roll or stretch it out into a round shape, about 16 inches across, leaving the edges slightly thicker. A large wooden board or metal pizza peel, dusted with cornmeal, lets the assembled pizza slide off smoothly. Assemble your pizza directly on this peel, starting with sauce spread thin, then your cheese, then your chosen toppings. Now, back to the pit itself. Since your fire should be approaching that 3-hour mark, once your stones have turned that pale grey or white color, it's time to prepare the pit for cooking. Using a long-handled rake, carefully spread these coals evenly across the bottom of the pit for uniform heat. The first option, direct cooking, involves raking most of the coals to the edges, leaving a cleared center space. This method cooks fast, often in just 90 seconds, similar to how a commercial wood-fired oven works. The second option involves removing the coals entirely from the pit, sweeping them out completely. What's left behind is bare, intensely heated stone, radiating stored heat without any active coals touching your food. Whichever method you choose, once the pit is prepared, slide your assembled pizza off the peel directly onto the stone. Hesitating results in torn dough, so commit to the motion fully once you start. Cover the pit loosely with a large inverted metal tub, trapping that intense heat around the pizza. This step turns your pit into a true oven, surrounding the food with heat rather than just cooking from below. If using a lid, leave a very small gap for minimal airflow to prevent smoke buildup that affects flavor. In the next part, we'll cover how long to leave it covered and how to check it safely without losing heat. Now, let's talk about timing. Since this is the part that separates a properly cooked underground pizza from one that's raw or burnt black. Once that pizza is covered and sealed inside the pit, resist the urge to check on it right away. Every time you lift that covering, you release a significant amount of trapped heat. The same problem as opening a regular oven door repeatedly. Amish cooks understood this instinctively with any covered cooking method. Whether it was a Dutch oven buried in coals or a covered pot, patience mattered more than curiosity. For the direct cooking method, with coals pushed to the sides, check at the 90-second mark by lifting the cover. You're looking for a crust that's just beginning to bubble and char slightly at the edges, with cheese starting to melt. For the indirect method, cooking purely off stored heat in the stone with coals removed entirely, give it a full 3 minutes before checking. This slower method is more forgiving, since there's no open flame directly beneath the crust that could scorch it while you lift the lid. When you do check, work quickly. Lift the cover, look, and close it again within just a few seconds if the pizza isn't ready yet. Every extra second that lid stays open lets heat escape that you worked 3 hours to build up in the first place. A properly cooking pizza in an underground oven behaves differently than one in a home oven, which surprised me the first time we tried. The crust puffs and blisters almost immediately, developing dark, charred spots within the first minute. similar to a professional wood-fired oven. This is completely normal, and it's actually a sign the method is working exactly as it should. Those charred spots are called leoparding. For most pizzas using the indirect method, total cooking time runs between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on the stones, heat, and dough thickness. Thinner crusts cook faster. A slightly thicker, traditional crust needs the fuller 5 minutes to cook through without leaving a raw, doughy center. Once you believe the pizza is done, use your peel to carefully slide underneath it and lift it out in one smooth motion. Set it on a cutting board immediately, away from the heat of the pit. Now, let's talk about what actually happened the first time. The crust came out with a deep char along the edges, with a smoky flavor that had everything to do with wood-heated stone. That smoky quality is not something you can replicate in a conventional oven, no matter how hot you set the dial. The bottom of the crust had a texture unlike anything from a metal baking sheet. It was crisp in a way that shattered slightly when cut. What surprised us most was the timing. We expected 10 minutes, but it was fully cooked, cheese bubbling, in just about 4 minutes. The heat radiating from that stone, built up over 3 hours of fire, was simply far more intense than anything a standard oven produces. The one mistake we made was leaving too many toppings. Spots with thicker layers took longer to melt compared to thinner areas. Next time, keeping toppings even across the entire surface would solve this. Now, let the pizza rest for 2 to 3 minutes before slicing. This short rest lets the cheese set slightly, making cleaner slices rather than cheese sliding off the moment your knife touches down. While it rests, check your pit for a second pizza. A properly built pit can handle 2 or 3 consecutive pizzas before the heat drops. A longer burn time, closer to 4 hours, builds extra reserve heat into that stone for more consecutive cooking rounds. Once finished, do not simply walk away. Coals and heated stone stay dangerously hot for many hours, sometimes into the next day. I want to cover exactly how to safely shut down and cool your pit, maintain it, and the full cost breakdown of this method. Let's talk about shutting down your pit safely, since this step matters just as much as building it correctly in the first place. It's the part most people skip when they're excited about the food they just made. An underground pit that's been burning for 3 or more hours holds an enormous amount of stored heat, both in the stones and the surrounding soil. This heat does not disappear quickly just because the visible flames are gone. Left alone, a pit like this can stay dangerously hot for 12 hours. Never leave a pit unattended while any heat remains, especially around children, pets, or anyone unfamiliar with what's actually underneath that ground. Amish farms treated this the same way they treated any working fire, with a clear rule that someone stayed responsible for it until fully resolved. If you're finished cooking for the day, the safest approach is a full, deliberate cool down. Remove any remaining coals with your long-handled rake. Spread them out on a non-flammable surface away from the pit, then extinguish them completely with water, stirring as you go. For the stones and the pit itself, do not pour water directly onto hot stone. This causes rapid steam expansion that can crack stones. Instead, let the pit cool naturally, covered loosely to slow airflow slightly, until the stones are cool enough to touch safely with a bare hand. If you plan to reuse the pit within the next few days, you don't need this full cool down at all. Simply cover the pit securely. A well-insulated pit, covered this way, often retains significant heat for the following day, meaning your next fire takes less time and wood. Let's talk about maintaining this pit long term. Since a properly built underground oven can genuinely last for years of repeated use. Check your stone lining after every few uses, looking for any cracked or damaged stones from repeated heat cycles. Replace any showing visible cracks. Between uses, keep the pit covered with a simple waterproof lid or tarp, preventing rain and moisture from soaking into the surrounding soil. A pit that stays dry heats up faster and more evenly each time, compared to one that's absorbed moisture from repeated exposure to weather. If you live somewhere with harsh winters, consider covering the entire pit area more thoroughly during the coldest months. Now let's talk about cost. Since this is where the real difference between this method and buying commercial equipment becomes completely clear. A quality commercial outdoor pizza oven typically costs between $800 and $2,500 before you've even lit a fire. An underground pit costs essentially nothing if you have access to dry stone, or under $100 if you're buying fire brick. This gap is not small. It's the difference between spending thousands on equipment versus spending an afternoon digging and gathering stone. Most commercial outdoor pizza ovens struggle to reach and hold the same sustained, deep heat that 3 hours of hardwood fire builds into stone. This is exactly why our pizza cooked in 4 minutes with that deep char and smoky flavor throughout, results that took genuine time to build. Let's talk about group cooking. Amish church gatherings and harvest celebrations regularly fed 50 or more people using exactly this underground method. A single well-built pit can realistically produce 8 to 10 pizzas from one fire building session, more than enough for a neighborhood cookout. In the final part, I want to bring everything together into one complete guide, along with final variations worth trying, like bread and other dishes. Here is the complete process laid out clearly, from empty ground to a finished pizza pulled hot from beneath the earth. Choose your site first. Dry, level ground, at least 10 feet clear from any structure, fence, or overhanging branch. Check ahead of time for buried utility lines by calling your utility company if you have any doubt at all. Pick a spot where wind won't carry smoke directly toward your house or a neighbor's yard, since you'll have a fire burning for hours. Dig a pit roughly 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep, straight-sided rather than sloped. Vertical walls hold heat more efficiently and give you a stable surface for your stone lining. Set the removed soil aside in an organized pile, since you may need portions of it again later to seal or maintain the pit. Line the pit completely with dry, dense stone. Never anything gathered from a creek or riverbed. Fit each piece tightly against the next, with no visible gaps left between them. Fire brick bought from a hardware store removes any guesswork if you're unsure whether stones on your property are safe. Build your fire directly on that stone lining using dry hardwood, oak, hickory, or applewood. Start small with kindling and build up steadily to larger pieces as the fire establishes itself fully. Burn continuously for a full 3 hours minimum, feeding it consistently rather than letting it die down. Watch for stones turning pale gray or white and the fire settling into a deep bed of glowing coals. While that fire burns, prepare your dough, giving it a full 90-minute rise in a warm spot. Keep your sauce, cheese, and toppings simple and light, since intense heat rewards a thin, evenly topped pizza. Once the pit reaches full temperature, rake out the coals completely for the indirect method if this is your first attempt. Slide your assembled pizza in with one confident motion, using a floured peel. Committing fully once the dough touches the stone. Cover the pit loosely, leaving a small gap of an inch or two for minimal airflow. Cook for 3 to 5 minutes, checking briefly rather than lingering with the cover open and losing heat. Look for a charred, blistered crust and fully melted, bubbling cheese as your sign it's ready. Slide it out using the peel. Let it rest on a cutting board, giving the cheese time to set properly. When finished, extinguish any remaining coals with water on a cleared surface away from the pit. Let the stone and earth cool naturally rather than shocking it with water, which risks cracking the stone. That is the entire method, using nothing beyond dirt, stone, fire, and a simple dough recipe. Flatbread, cooked the exact same way as pizza but without toppings, works beautifully in this setup. Whole loaves of bread can also be baked, though they need a longer, gentler heat than pizza does. Roasted vegetables, wrapped in foil, take advantage of that same underground heat for a smoky flavor. Whole cuts of meat can be wrapped and buried directly in the cooling coals and ash, cooking slowly over hours. This was the mindset of Amish farms. A fire representing real work should never be wasted. A commercial outdoor pizza oven costs thousands. This pit costs you an afternoon of digging and some stone. Some of the best cooking methods were never lost because they stopped working. They were set aside for convenience. The better option was always sitting right under your feet, waiting for someone to dig.